The wind howled through the broken steel buildings of the abandoned alien sector. Most humans avoided this place, but Daniel liked the silence here. He often walked alone after work, far from the noise of the refugee city. But tonight was different. Something felt wrong. As Daniel stepped over scattered wires and dust, he heard a sound. It wasn't a machine, not the creak of metal. It was soft, broken, a whimper. He froze, listening carefully. Then he saw her. At the top of a half-collapsed tower stood a figure. Slim, with long white hair flowing in the wind. An alien girl, barefoot, dressed in torn rags. She stood on the edge of the rooftop, arms stretched out, ready to fall. Daniel's heart jumped. She didn't see him yet. He quietly moved closer, step by step, trying not to startle her. Then, her voice floated down to him. "I can't do this anymore," she said, barely a whisper. "I'm so tired." Daniel didn't shout. He didn't tell her to stop or ask what she was doing. Instead, he calmly said 4 words. "You're not alone anymore." The girl froze, her body tensed, but she didn't jump. Slowly she turned her head, her glowing blue eyes wide with fear and confusion. She didn't speak. Daniel raised his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm just a human. My name's Daniel." He took one slow step forward. The girl didn't move. She looked like a statue. Her skin was pale, almost transparent, with strange glowing patterns across her arms. She was clearly malnourished, weak and shaking. Daniel noticed how tight her fists were. She was ready to end it. He sat down on a nearby piece of broken concrete. "Not too close, not too far. I come here when I feel lost," he said. "Some days. I wonder why I even bother trying." He smiled faintly, "But then I think, maybe someone out there is having a worse day than me." The girl slowly turned her face toward him. Her lips parted slightly. She looked confused, as if no one had ever spoken to her that way before. "I don't know your name," Daniel continued. "I don't know what you've been through." He pointed to the stars above. "But the fact that you're still here means you haven't given up yet." The girl whispered something, too soft to hear. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "I didn't catch that." She looked away, embarrassed. Then she said it again. "My name is Velen." Daniel smiled gently. "Velen," he repeated. "That's a beautiful name." Tears rolled down her cheeks. She hugged herself tightly. "They hurt me," she whispered. "They called me a thing, a toy, a mistake." Her knees shook, and she nearly lost her balance. Daniel stood quickly. "Velen, step back, please." She didn't fall, but she also didn't move. "I'm not strong," she said. "I don't have anyone." Her voice broke. "There's nothing left for me." Daniel stepped a little closer. "I was the only survivor when my colony was destroyed," he said. "They left me behind. I was just a boy." He looked into her eyes. "I know what it's like to feel forgotten." Velen stared at him. The wind pushed against her, almost daring her to jump, but she stayed still. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, warm protein bar. He placed it on the ledge. "Take this," he said. "I'll wait right here." For a long time she didn't move then. Her hand slowly reached forward and picked up the bar. She held it like it was a treasure. Her lips trembled. "Why are you helping me?" Daniel shrugged. "Because someone has to." Silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The wind died down. The danger faded just a little. Velen stepped away from the edge. She looked exhausted but somehow lighter. Daniel exhaled in relief. "You don't have to talk," he said. "Just don't give up." Velen nodded once, weakly, then collapsed in his arms. Daniel caught her gently. As she fainted, she whispered, "You're not like the others." "No," Daniel said softly. "I'm human, and in that dark, broken part of the city, a spark of hope was born." The night was quiet. Too quiet. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. Daniel carried Velen in his arms through the dark alleyways of the abandoned sector. She was light, far too light for someone her size. Her body felt like a bundle of bones and sorrow. He kept looking down at her pale face. Wondering how long she had suffered like this, he reached his small shelter, a room inside a broken cargo ship, old, rusty, but warm enough to survive the cold nights. Daniel laid her gently on a worn-out blanket and placed a cracked heating pod beside her. Her skin twitched at the warmth, but she didn't wake. He sat beside her and watched every few minutes. Her body shivered or her lips moved silently, like she was trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He just waited. By morning, Velen opened her eyes. She looked around in confusion, blinking at the soft light coming through the cracks in the ceiling. Her voice came out hoarse. "Where am I?" "You're safe," Daniel said, offering her a small cup of water. She didn't take it right away. Instead, she stared at it like it might explode. Daniel didn't rush her. He placed the cup beside her and sat back. "I didn't bring you here to hurt you," he said. "You jumped into my arms, remember?" Velen nodded slowly. Her fingers reached for the cup and lifted it to her lips. The water was warm, not much, but to her, it tasted like life itself. Daniel cooked some emergency food, a bland but hot meal. The smell filled the room, and Velen's stomach growled loudly. She looked embarrassed, but Daniel just smiled. "No shame in hunger," he said. He handed her a small bowl. She ate slowly at first, unsure, then faster, as if afraid it might disappear. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "You don't have to thank me. You just have to stay alive." A long silence followed. But it wasn't empty. Something heavy hung in the air. A story, unspoken but loud. Daniel broke the silence. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" Velen froze, her spoon mid-air. She looked down at the bowl, then away. "They bought me," she said at last, "from my family. When I was still small." Daniel's heart tightened. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. "They said I was special," she continued. "My eyes, my blood, my brain. I was useful." She looked at Daniel now, her voice getting colder. "Useful for experiments, for training, for pleasure." Daniel didn't speak, he just listened. "They called me a thing," she said, "not a person. Just a thing." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she wiped them away fast. "I tried to escape, many times. They always found me." "What about this time?" Daniel asked gently. "How did you end up on that rooftop?" Velen looked away. "I ran. Again. I hid for days. No food, no water." Her voice cracked. "Then I realized I had nowhere to go." Silence again. Daniel took a deep breath. "I'm sorry you went through that." Velen blinked. No one had ever said that to her before, not even once. "Most people," she whispered, "they look at me like I'm dirty." She pulled her sleeves down, covering glowing scars on her wrists. Daniel leaned forward. "You're not dirty, Velen. You're a survivor." She looked at him like he was insane. "I'm broken," she replied. Daniel shook his head. "Broken doesn't mean worthless." Velen covered her face with her hands. Then for the first time, she cried, not silent tears, but real, shaking sobs. Daniel didn't touch her. He didn't try to stop her. He just let her cry. Sometimes silence says more than words ever can. When she finally calmed down, she looked at him with tired, red eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Daniel shrugged. "I was left behind too," he said. "Maybe that's why I noticed you when no one else did." Velen nodded slowly. Her lips trembled. "I don't know how to live," she admitted. Daniel gave her a soft smile. "Then let's learn together." That night, they shared a small meal and watched the stars from a broken window. Velen didn't say much, but her silence didn't scream anymore. This time, it rested, and in that quiet moment, a bond began to form, not between a human and an alien, but between two broken souls finally starting to heal. The sky was dark again, but this time, it didn't feel empty. Inside the broken cargo shelter, a small light flickered near the heater. Daniel sat cross-legged, working on a damaged radio, while Velen watched from the corner, wrapped in a blanket. She hadn't spoken much since her breakdown, but her eyes followed everything Daniel did. She looked at him like someone watching a storm unsure if it would bring rain or lightning. "What's that?" she finally asked, her voice small. Daniel looked up, surprised she spoke first. "It's an old communicator," he replied, smiling. "Broken, like everything else out here." He paused, then added, "But I like fixing things." Velen looked down, she whispered. "Can broken things be fixed?" Daniel put down the tool slowly. He met her eyes, serious now. "Some things take time," he said. "But yes, they can," Velen nodded. Not fully believing him, but not rejecting the thought either. The next morning, Daniel made her tea using dry leaves in a solar kettle. It tasted bitter, but Velen didn't complain. She drank it quietly and sat beside the door, watching the outside world with tired eyes. Then something happened. A sound from the sky, distant engines. Both of them froze. "Are they looking for you?" Daniel asked carefully. Veline's hands gripped the blanket tighter. "They always are," she whispered. "I left with something they want." Daniel didn't ask what it was, not yet. Instead, he stood and sealed the door from inside. "You're safe here," he said. "I won't let them take you." Velen stared at him, confused. "Why? You don't even know me." Daniel looked at her, his expression calm. "I don't need to know your past to care about your future." That sentence made her blink fast, like it hit something deep inside her. No one had ever said such words to her, not her handlers, not the buyers, not even her own people. Later that day, Daniel offered her his datapad. It was old, cracked, but it still had working audio logs. He played a melody, soft human piano music. Velen closed her eyes, listening carefully. "What is this?" she asked. "Music," Daniel said. "It's something humans made when they wanted to feel hope." "Hope," she whispered, like it was a word she had never been allowed to use. Daniel watched her silently. After the music ended, she asked, "Why do you talk to me like I matter?" "Because you do," Daniel said simply. "You're not property. You're a person." She lowered her head, voice trembling. "They said I wasn't." "Well, they were wrong," Daniel replied. That night, Velen asked to sleep closer to the heater, not in the corner. She didn't say why, but Daniel understood. Each day after that, she spoke a little more. She asked about Earth, about colors, about laughter. Daniel answered with stories, some happy, some sad. She listened to all of them like they were magic. In return, she shared something too. "I was trained to obey," she said one evening. "To sit, to speak, to smile when told." They used collars with pain pulses. She showed him a thin scar around her neck. Daniel clenched his fists. "I'm sorry," he said again. But this time he added something new. "You're free now. You don't have to follow orders anymore." Veline's lips parted. She whispered, "What am I supposed to do then?" Daniel smiled gently. "Whatever you want." Those words changed something in her. She looked away, blinking fast again. But this time, she wasn't just trying not to cry. She was trying to believe it. Before sleeping, she sat beside him and asked, "If I were human, would I matter more?" Daniel shook his head. "No, you matter because you're you." He looked at her and said the words she had never heard before. Words that no one had ever said to her, not even once. "You deserve kindness." Velen covered her mouth with her hand. Tears flowed silently, but her body didn't shake. She didn't feel pain this time, just release outside. The stars moved slowly. Inside, something broken started to heal word by word, gesture by gesture. Not through force, not through control, but through something Velen had never known before. Compassion. And as she closed her eyes that night, lying under a thin blanket, she whispered to herself a sentence that sounded strange in her own voice, but felt warm. "I want to live." Daniel heard it, but said nothing. He just smiled in the dark, because for the first time since he found her, Velen was finally choosing life. The rain poured outside, cold and heavy, inside the rusty shelter. It dripped through a small hole in the ceiling. Daniel placed a tin bowl under the leak and looked over at Velen. She was awake but silent, staring at her own hands like they didn't belong to her. "Do you feel cold?" Daniel asked. She shook her head slowly. "I don't feel much at all," she replied. Daniel sat beside her with a soft blanket. "Your body is healing," he said, "but the mind takes longer." Velen looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "Do you really want to know what they did to me?" she asked quietly. Daniel paused. "If you want to tell me," he replied. She nodded slowly. Her hands gripped the sides of her thin shirt, and she began to pull it up. Daniel quickly looked away, but she said, "No, it's not like that. Look." She turned her back to him, revealing a glowing pattern running down her spine. Not natural, not beautiful. Metallic lines, cold and sharp, were embedded beneath her skin, wires, ports, and a small black chip near her neck. Daniel felt sick. "What is that?" "A control system," Velen said, her voice hollow. "They installed it when I was 12. She sat straight, unmoved by the rain leaking around them. "They could make me move, speak, or freeze with a button." Daniel stood up slowly, pacing the room with clenched fists. He had heard stories of such tech outlawed in most systems, but secretly used on living beings. "I'll get it out," he said. Velen turned, alarmed. "You can't," she said quickly. "It's tied to my nervous system, if removed wrongly. I'll die." Silence hung in the air like a blade. Daniel finally sat down again, trying to calm his breath. "There must be a way," he whispered. Velen shook her head. "I've lived with it for years. I've learned how to resist it a little." She touched the scar around her neck. "They removed my collar when they thought I was broken," she said. "But this," she pointed to her back, "is still inside me." Daniel looked her in the eyes. "I'll find someone. I'll find a way." Velen smiled sadly. "You're strange, Daniel," she said. "No one has ever said those words to me before." "What words?" he asked. She answered softly, "I'll find a way." That evening, while Velen slept, Daniel searched through his old equipment. He pulled out a cracked data chip from his military jacket. It was full of blacklisted tech, illegal manuals, and survival tools from his days as a battlefield engineer. He connected the chip to his scanner. An old program popped up. Implanted neural devices, military and civilian use. He began reading. Hours passed, and Daniel didn't sleep. The rain stopped, but the weight in the air grew heavier. Velen woke up and saw him still awake. "You didn't rest?" she asked. "I couldn't," Daniel replied. He looked serious, more than ever before. "I found something," he said. "There's a way to disable the chip without removing it." Velen sat up quickly. "What do you mean?" "If I can cut the signal lines near your shoulders and shut the chip's power relay," he said, "then the control function dies, and you'll still live." Her eyes widened. "But it'll hurt, won't it?" Daniel nodded. "A lot," he admitted. "But after that, no one can ever control you again." Velen stared at him, fear and hope battling in her heart. I don't know," she said. "What if I scream? What if I beg you to stop during the process?" Daniel looked at her seriously. "Then I'll stop," he said. "Because you decide now." Those words struck her harder than anything. She took a deep breath, then looked away. "I'll think about it," she whispered. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat beside the heater, her arms wrapped around her knees. She looked at her reflection in a cracked mirror. The glowing lines on her skin, the memories, the commands. She was forced to obey, and Daniel's voice echoed in her mind. "You decide now." By morning, she walked to him, her voice steady. "I want you to do it." Daniel's hands trembled, but he nodded. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said. "I want to be free, even if it hurts." He prepared the tools, an old sterilizer, a heat blade, and the guide he read all night. Velen sat on a stool, back exposed, eyes closed. Daniel placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "Just say stop anytime," he said. She nodded, and then he began. Her body flinched as the blade cut through skin and wires. Her breath hitched, but she didn't scream. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but her mouth stayed shut. When the final wires snapped, her whole body went limp. The chip's glow faded. Daniel caught her before she collapsed. She was shaking, sweating, but breathing. "I did it," he said, breathless. "You're free." Velen opened her eyes slowly. "I feel strange," she whispered. "Like a weight is gone." He helped her lie down gently. She smiled weakly. "Thank you for giving me the choice." And for the first time in her life, the chains beneath her skin were gone. The morning after the procedure was silent. No birds, no winds, no voices. Just the slow breathing of Velen and the quiet hum of the heater. Daniel sat by the doorway, watching the cloudy sky. His eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but he couldn't relax. Something inside him felt wrong, like the air itself was holding its breath. Velen was still resting, her back bandaged with soft cloth and healing cream Daniel had found in an old med kit. Her body was still shaking a little, but she was no longer in chains. Suddenly, a high-pitched sound cut through the silence. Daniel's eyes snapped to the sky. He stepped outside and looked up. They were here, 3 distant dots in the sky, moving fast and low ships, not human, not commercial. They were shaped like blades, dark, sleek, and deadly, hunter-class ships. Daniel rushed back in. "Velen, wake up," he said urgently. She opened her eyes slowly, still weak. What's happening?" "They've found you," he replied. "They're here." Velen's eyes widened with terror. Her hands instinctively went to her neck. Forgetting the collar was gone, she looked around, shaking. "They'll take me back," she whispered. "They'll kill you." Daniel knelt beside her and grabbed her shoulders. "No one is taking you anywhere," he said firmly. "I promised you. But we can't fight them," she said, her voice cracking. "They have weapons, drones, trackers." Daniel stood and grabbed an old case from under the floor. He opened it to reveal several dusty metal objects, a pulse rifle, 2 flash grenades, and an emergency beacon, ancient human military tools. He checked the charge on the rifle, still holding, barely. "I didn't tell you," he said while loading the weapon, "but I used to be an engineer in the Resistance. Before the ceasefire, I fixed weapons and hacked systems." Velen sat up slowly. "You're going to fight them?" "I'll slow them down," Daniel replied. "You stay hidden no matter what happens." Tears filled Velen's eyes again. "You'll die," she whispered. Daniel smiled softly. "Better to die free than live afraid." He handed her a COMM patch. "If anything happens to me, press this," he said. "It'll send a signal to any old human satellite still working." "Maybe someone will come." Velen stared at him. "But you hate crowds, you hate people." Daniel chuckled. "I do," he said. "But I hate watching the innocent suffer even more." Outside, the hum of engines grew louder. Dust kicked up near the edge of the sector as the ships prepared to land. Daniel ran to the rooftop of the shelter and took position behind a broken wall. He could see them now, 3 ships, 2 drones, and several armored soldiers marching toward the ruins. All of them carried shock staffs, capture nets, and control spikes. They weren't here to talk. They were here to reclaim their property. Daniel aimed his rifle and whispered, "Not today." He fired the first shot. A loud pulse echoed through the ruins as a drone exploded mid-air. The soldiers ducked for cover, shouting in their language. Daniel rolled behind cover and threw a flash grenade. White light filled the street as he moved positions. His heart was pounding, but he didn't stop. Inside the shelter, Velen crawled to the door, listening. She heard shouts, gunfire, and the hiss of engines. She wanted to run, to hide, but her chest ached with something stronger than fear, guilt. He was fighting for her. Again, she grabbed the cum patch, but she didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, she stood on shaky legs and reached for the old blade Daniel kept by the door. If he could risk his life for her, then she would not run this time. On the rooftop, Daniel ducked just in time to avoid a net that shot over his head. He turned and fired another Pulse 1 soldier down. But his rifle was overheating now. He gritted his teeth. He couldn't hold much longer. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the street below. "Daniel." He looked down and froze. It was Velen standing in the open, blade in hand. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "Go back inside." She didn't move. The soldiers paused too, surprised to see her. She raised her arm and shouted in their language, "I'm not yours anymore. You have no power over me." One of the soldiers stepped forward with a control spike, trying to activate her chip. But nothing happened. The glow on her back was gone. The soldier screamed in rage and rushed toward her. Daniel jumped from the rooftop and tackled him before he reached her. They fought, hand to hand. Daniel took a hit to the ribs, but stabbed the soldier in the leg with a broken pipe. Another drone fired, but Velen swung her blade and knocked it out of the air. Together, they stood side by side, back to back, fighting, bleeding, breathing, and just as they thought it was over, a distant sound filled the air, low, powerful, ancient. A ship, not alien, but human, an old model flying over the horizon. The beacon had worked. Daniel smiled through bloodied lips. "You pressed the signal?" Velen shook her head. "No," she said. "I chose to fight." And as the hunter ship scrambled and the human craft hovered above them, Daniel whispered, "Then you're truly free." The first rays of morning light broke through the clouds. But the battlefield was still covered in smoke and broken metal. 2 drones lay in pieces. One hunter ship had fled, and the other was burning in the ruins. Daniel leaned against the wall, clutching his bleeding side. His pulse rifle was empty, the barrel scorched and useless now. But he was still standing. Velen knelt beside him, using a torn strip of cloth to wrap his wound. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from rage and focus. "Why did you jump down?" she asked, voice firm but low. "You should have stayed on the rooftop." Daniel gave a weak laugh. "I told you," he said. "I don't run." A loud crash echoed through the streets. The third hunter ship had landed, heavier, larger, and carrying reinforcements. Velen's breath caught in her throat. More soldiers, armored, emotionless, stepped out. Their boots slammed against the stone with rhythm. No anger, no mercy, just orders. Daniel's grip on her hand tightened. "You don't have to fight this one," he said. "I'll draw them away. You run to the forest behind the ridge." Velen looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "I'm not leaving you," she snapped. "I'm not running anymore. You gave me back my body, my voice, my will, and now you want me to abandon you?" Daniel, Winston pain but smiled, was worth a try. The new commander of the hunters stepped forward. His voice was cold and sharp. "Subject 71V, he said, addressing Velen. "Return now. You have no rights. You are stolen property." Velen stood tall, her blade still in hand. "I am not a number," she replied. "I am Velen." The soldiers raised their weapons. Daniel pushed himself up, holding onto the broken wall for support. He whispered, "We hold here as long as we can." The human ship above had not landed, yet it was circling, possibly scanning, maybe waiting for a signal. But they didn't have time. "Ready?" Daniel asked. Velen nodded. "Together," she said. Soldiers charged. Daniel threw his last flash grenade, and light blinded the first wave. Velen moved like wind and fire, her blade slicing through the air. They fought side by side, their movements messy but full of purpose. She covered him when he fell. He pushed her away from blasts more than once, but the soldiers were many, and Velen was still healing. Daniel took another hit, this time to his leg. He dropped to one knee, gritting his teeth. "I'm slowing down," he muttered. Velen stood over him, defending fiercely. "You held the sky for me," she said, her voice shaking. "Now let me hold the ground for you then." Something incredible happened. The human ship above stopped circling. It descended rapidly and released a piercing blue beacon from its underbelly. The hunter soldiers paused as the beam hit the ground. And then came the voice, broadcast through every comm channel nearby. "Step away from the girl. She is now under Terran Protection Protocol 19A. Any aggression will be met with immediate force." The hunters hesitated. One of them tried to aim, a warning shot from the human. Ship blasted a crater next to him. Daniel's eyes widened. That voice. I know it, he said softly. Captain Reyes? A human dropship detached and landed with a loud thud. Soldiers in old Earth Federation gear stepped out, weapons ready, armor shining in the sun. Stand down, shouted their leader. We're here for the girl and the man who saved her, Villain. Couldn't move. Her hands were shaking, her legs trembling. Is this real? She whispered. Daniel nodded, barely able to stay on his feet. They heard us, he said. You're not alone anymore. The hunter soldiers finally stepped back. They grabbed their injured and retreated to their ship. Within moments, the alien vessel lifted and disappeared into the sky. The battlefield grew quiet. The human team rushed to Daniel, injecting a med pack into his side. You're lucky we picked up your old beacon, the medic said. Most of those things don't even work anymore. Daniel looked toward Villain. She was standing still, her face frozen with emotion. Captain Reyes approached her. You're safe now, he said gently. We're taking you both back to Earth. Refuge HQ. Velen stepped closer to Daniel. Will he live? She asked, voice trembling again. The medic smiled. He'll be okay. For the first time, she fell to her knees, not out of fear, but relief. She looked at Daniel and whispered, You fought for me, you bled for me. Now let me take you home. Daniel smiled faintly. Home, he repeated. I forgot what that word even meant. As the sun rose fully, lighting up the broken city, 2 survivors, 1 human, 1 alien, were carried into a future neither of them had expected. Together, they had made a stand, and together, they had won. The air inside the Earth Refuge Medical Facility was warm and clean. Sunlight poured in through wide windows, touching everything with gold. Birds chirped in the trees outside, and for once, there was no sound of sirens. No weapons, no fear. Daniel lay in a soft bed, his chest wrapped in white bandages. His ribs were healing, his leg in a support brace. Beside him, in a small chair, sat Velen Clean, dressed in new clothes. Her silver white hair brushed smooth. She looked different now. Stronger, but not hardened. Braver, but not bitter. Daniel opened his eyes slowly. Velen leaned forward, smiling gently. You're awake, she whispered. Daniel smiled faintly. Unless this is a really nice dream. She laughed softly. No dream this time, she said. You're safe. He looked around the white room and raised an eyebrow. This place looks too perfect. It's the Human Aid Recovery Center. Velen said. They built it for survivors. Of wars, of slavery, of everything. Daniel nodded slowly. How long have I been out? 3 days, she replied. I didn't leave your side. He looked at her and whispered. Why? Velen lowered her eyes, then looked back up with quiet strength. Because you didn't leave mine. There was silence, but it was soft, not sad. Then Daniel chuckled. I guess I saved an alien girl. And accidentally made a new friend. Velen tilted her head. Friend? She repeated, testing the word, then smiled. I like that word. Later that day, Captain Reyes came to see them. He saluted Daniel, who tried to sit up and groaned. In pain. Easy, soldier, Reyes said. You did enough. I wasn't a soldier, Daniel replied. I was just someone who refused to walk away. Reyes nodded. Sometimes, that makes you more human than any uniform ever could. Handed Velen a silver card with Earth Federation symbols. Velen, we've processed your asylum, he said. You are now officially protected. And free. Velen stared at the card, speechless. She touched the symbol like it was fragile. Thank you, she whispered. Reyes nodded and looked at Daniel. She saved your life out there. Daniel smiled at her. She saved my soul. When they were alone again, Daniel looked out the window. I haven't seen a sunrise this bright in years, he said. It's strange. Velen followed his gaze. On my home planet, she said, sunrises were always purple. He turned to her. Do you miss it? She thought for a long moment. No, she finally said. That place gave me pain, not peace. Daniel nodded slowly. Then maybe. This is your home now. She turned to him, something glowing in her eyes. You gave me back my life. She said, but more than that, you gave me a name. He looked confused. You already had a name. She shook her head. Velen was the name they used when they controlled me, she explained. But now, I want a new one, Daniel smiled. What do you want it to be? She took a deep breath, looked out at the sun again. I want to be called Nova, she said, because I was lost in the dark. And now I burn bright, Daniel grinned. Nova, he repeated. Yeah, that fits. A few weeks later, Daniel was walking again, with help, of course. Nova walked beside him every day in the garden. She had started smiling more, asking questions, learning human ways. Children at the center liked her. They said she looked like a space fairy. One little girl asked, "Is he your dad?" Nova had laughed so hard she almost fell, but when the girl left, she turned to Daniel and asked, "Do I seem like family?" Daniel nodded. Yeah, the kind you choose, Nova smiled. I like that even more. On the last day of their recovery, as they packed their things, Daniel turned to her. So what happens now? Nova looked around the room, then out the window. Now, we build something, she said. A life, maybe. A future, he raised an eyebrow. With me? She smiled. Who else would I trust? Daniel extended his hand. Then let's go find that sunrise, Nova. She took his hand and together, they stepped into the light. Two survivors no longer broken, one human, one alien, walking forward with new names, new hearts, and a promise never to walk alone again.